How's it going out there, everybody? Welcome again to another episode of Explain a Thrones, the podcast where we go through the TV show and explain the depth of the books and what you are missing if you have not read the books. And we're going to delve deeply, now that the show is on, into the most recent episode 7.2, Stormborn. Today I have my wife's cousin and my good friend Robin Cabana on. Robin, say hello.
Hi, guys.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your familiarity with Game of Thrones?
Sure. I read all the books quite a while ago, it feels like, though. And I've been watching the show since it's been on, and I also am a collector of Game of Thrones Funko Pops.
That's excellent. There's
yes,
plenty of memorabilia out there these days now.
Yes, definitely. So, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with things, and I have a hard time keeping it all straight because it's just so massive, and so there's so much difference between the books and show at this point that I can't remember which is which.
Yeah.
I'm always, looking it up online, and,
No, it definitely is. It's
yes.
so many things to remember and think about, and especially now that they're beyond the scope of the books.
Yeah.
Things are completely out of the realm of the books.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I wanted to start this podcast and why I'm continuing it, because it feels like they're at the point where they're totally missing the point of the books. You understand? To me, what made Game of Thrones so good, and it's something they did for the first 3 or 4 seasons, is that it all followed a very grounded logic, and the strategy was important. The battles were cool, but they used different tricks to avoid having to shoot too much.
Yeah.
One of my favorite little things they did, and I'm sure a lot of people were like, oh, that's bullshit, why'd they do that, was in the first season at the Battle of the Green Fork, they knock Tyrion out.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? And then he just wakes up and the battle is over.
Yeah.
But, to me, even though that's an awesome part in the first book where you get to really see, Tywin's strategy, and you get to kind of watch Robb Stark's strategy from a distance, and you even get a little bit into the mind of Roose Bolton. But they can't shoot an insane
they didn't have
battle.
the budget back then.
Yeah, they really didn't back then. And now that they do, it feels like they're kind of well, this is what people want to see.
There's definitely a lot of that, I think.
Yeah, and it's the Battle of the Bastards was really awesome and all.
All is epic.
It was crazy, but my nitpicking brain was just where was the strategy in it?
That was definitely a free-for-all.
Exactly.
Yeah,
the whole part where Sansa and Jon are talking before, and she's telling him just listen to me, you're not listening to me. Don't do what Ramsay wants. But then she offered nothing for him to do. She didn't say hey, I've got all these Knights of the Vale coming, so don't go put yourself out on the line and nearly die. Don't go into the middle of battle. That's all I was looking for, was a little bit of explanation and a little bit of intelligence rather than just raw brute force.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that in this last episode, they actually did have some strategy, but it was a total fail.
Yeah, well, let's...
They finally saw a whole big plot. It was a big old fail, so...
Exactly. Well, let's dive right into it, because that's pretty much exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So, the episode begins. They're on Dragonstone. It's Tyrion, Varys... Who else is there?
Grey Worm and...
Yeah, actually, I'm skipping ahead. First, they had that little bit where they were talking about, this is much like the storm you were born in. And that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'll always love Game of Thrones world building.
Yeah. And that's when she calls out Varys, too.
Right.
Something everybody, I think, wants to do, because that guy, you're just like, how is he still alive?
Yeah.
He's betrayed everyone. Nobody can trust him. I still don't trust him, even though he just swore his allegiance to Dany. I still do not ever trust that guy.
Yeah,
and
well, that's kind of one of the funny key difference in the books and show. Like, it's funny when you say, like, do you like a character or not? Because it's like so many characters in this show and book are absolutely evil, but I still like the ones that are evil.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Like Varys, I liked in the show because it seems as though he is kind of like pure of heart. But Varys in the books is not at all.
Oh, no. He's pretty despicable.
He's been just absolutely scheming this whole time. And for people who have not read the books, there is probably the largest plot line that has been cut from the show is that you find out in the 5th book that Varys and Illyrio, the guy who sold Daenerys, have been scheming this entire time, not for Daenerys. They've been scheming for an entirely different Targaryen.
Yeah, that's right.
There's Aegon Targaryen, who is supposedly the son of Rhaegar, who everyone believes was killed back when Tywin and the Mountains sacked King's Landing. But as is explained to Tyrion, Varys actually switched the babies out and absconded with them, and they've been raising him. And have you heard the fan theory behind that one that's even a little deeper?
No, I haven't.
It's one of my favorites because it's one of the few that I actually believe.
Okay.
I love on this podcast talking about theories, but people probably get frustrated because I usually end up saying, I don't believe that one. But this is one of the ones that I actually believe, is that the young Aegon is not actually Aegon Targaryen, but is actually one of the Blackfires. The Blackfires were the Targaryen bastards that, like, 100 years previous did a rebellion. Did multiple rebellions. I think there were like 4 or 5 Blackfire rebellions. And essentially what had happened was there was King Aegon IV, was called Aegon the Unworthy. And he's basically like, imagine Henry VIII times a million. In terms of gluttony, in terms of insatiable lust, in terms of just being a despicable human being. And so he was basically banging every lord's wife and every peasant girl, every whore in King's Landing, everyone he could get his hands on. And so when he died, he had, you know how like a big element of the show and the books is that Robert has all these bastards?
Yeah.
Well, Aegon had tons of bastards. And, you know, he was married to, I think, his sister, like most of the Targaryens were. So he did have some true-born heirs. And then he also had these bastards that he loved more than his true-born sons and daughters. Two of the most important being Bloodraven and Bittersteel. Now, Bloodraven is actually the three-eyed crow, the dude in the tree that Bran comes across.
Cool.
So he's been alive for 120 some odd years.
Wow.
Right, and he's one of my absolute favorite characters. Once the show is done and we start doing like individual topics, I'm definitely going to do a whole episode on Bloodraven.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I gotta read some of these backstory, and side story things. I haven't gotten to them yet, but
and that's the thing.
Fascinating how much story there is.
There really is. And the books, since everything's from different characters' point of view, you only get like bits and pieces. Just like tiny little bits. You almost have to piece it together. You almost can't piece it together unless you do some sort of conspiracy theory, like putting a bulletin board with the wires connecting everyone.
Yeah, I'm sure there are people who do that.
Yeah, certainly are.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing now that going into the whole Blackfire explanation is going to take forever, so I'll make it quick.
Yeah.
So basically, Bloodraven, before he went up to the tree, he was essentially like Melisandre meets Varys meets Littlefinger meets Tywin. He was this crazy, talented commander of the armies. He was also the master of whisperers. He was the hand of the king because even though he was a bastard of Aegon IV, he believed in the trueborn Targaryens. He was like, I'm only going to help the throne and the current Targaryen king. And he actually was hand of the king for multiple Targaryen kings. But his brothers, his half-brothers and stuff, they wanted to rebel because on Aegon's deathbed, he gave the Valyrian steel sword that the original Aegon the Conqueror brought to Westeros to one of the bastards. And many people saw that as he was essentially giving his blessing to the bastards rather than the trueborn to be the next kings of Westeros. So it led to this huge rivalry. Daemon Blackfire was the one who was supposed to be the bastard king, but this other one who was Bloodraven's main rival was named Bittersteel. And Bittersteel founded the Golden Company. Now, you've read the books, so you remember Tyrion gets tied to the Golden Company, and then, or no, he gets tied to the Second Sons. It is the young Aegon that ends up getting tied to the Golden Company.
Okay.
So essentially, what's going on is over 100 years later, what may be the great-great-great-great-grandson of the Blackfires is now leading the sellsword company that was founded by the leader of the Blackfires. There's also ties that perhaps Varys himself is a Blackfire. That's why he shaves his head, so that no one sees the Targaryen features and all that. So,
interesting.
Yeah, a long, fun, interesting possibility.
Very interesting.
So anyways, though, back to the show. So yeah, I'm so glad that Varys finally got called out by Daenerys, because it's like, that's why she kicked Jorah out.
Yes, exactly.
You know, her number one...
Poor Jorah.
Yeah, oh my god, poor friend zone Jorah. So, yeah, she finally dealt with Varys, which is good. And then Melisandre shows up.
Which, another one who you're just like, really?
Yeah. Does she have a magical teleporter that gets her exactly where the plot needs her to go?
and she just shows up like, you know, hey, I want to come play with you guys.
Yeah.
And Tyrion's like, wait a minute, sister. I know who you are.
Exactly. And Varys, too.
You know?
And going back to Varys' awesome backstory, how he hates magic because he was made a eunuch by a sorcerer. Yeah. In one of the weirder scenes that is actually from the books that made it into the show. Yeah, that was kind of weird. But yeah, so they're back. But the actual strategy part, once the Dornish and Olenna, the Queen of Thorns, and the Greyjoys show up, and they're in the map room, and they're finally talking strategy.
Yes, and that was really cool, seeing them all together. I like that so many characters are finally meeting and coming together this season. You know, we've waited so long for people to
it's like the whole show has been about what alliances are going to form, and it seems like they're finally set. Yeah,
even though they're still a little tenuous, like I wouldn't trust the Sands either, and I wouldn't trust Varys. But, you know.
Yeah,
but it's still interesting. And I wouldn't trust Greyjoys either, come to think of it. I wouldn't trust any of them.
Well,
that's what it comes down to.
there's a lot of good points in there, because, like,
Yeah.
The Greyjoys are one of my favorite houses.
Yeah.
Again, not because I think they're good people.
Yeah.
They're terrible people.
No,
they're the worst people.
They're pretty awful.
But I freaking love the just the aesthetic of these like Viking peoples who have a squid for their sigil. Yeah, the golden kraken on the black field, and they ride these ships, and all the uncles who are left out of the show. We touched on that a little bit in the last one because we talked about Euron for a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're hard to trust, but the show has to kind of shorthand its characters.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, they made Yara essentially just like tough bitch. And well, we'll get into Theon later.
Yeah.
The Sand Snakes are kind of the saddest, underdone. They're like a bunch of raw eggs when it comes to character development.
They really are, and it was to the point like when they would show their scenes maybe last year, like I just wanted to fast forward them. Like I just found them real like
well,
it wasn't until like Jamie got involved,
right?
You know, because. Otherwise, their whole plot was just like, boring.
Yeah, well,
you know?
that was actually 2 years ago that they were a big one. Last year, though, to your point, last year they pretty much cut them out of the show.
Okay.
They were like, we realize people don't like this.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're back now.
Yes.
But going back. Yeah, and they're all back. But going back to strategy, like what I feel is missing from the show... Did you realize how much their plan sucked while they were talking about it?
Well, I mean, I thought it was interesting, but it like
they're gonna sail. Okay, so first of all, in terms, because one of the things I've also complained about is that the books having the map in the front is so important.
Oh,
that you understand the geography. Exactly, and it's like. They tried to do that with the intro. Yeah. You know, where they're showing us all the different locations and everything, but by having it zoom around, you don't really get a sense of the realistic difficulty in traveling in the medieval world.
Exactly.
You know?
So, unless you're like a nerd like us who has it memorized.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
You know,
so.
I have the Middle Earth poster hanging on my door.
Awesome.
I need the Westeros one to go under it. That's my second favorite map in fantasy literature.
I just started finally listening to Lord of the Rings on audiobook.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
cool.
So I'm finally getting into,
great.
You know, I'm loving it. But since it's on audiobook, I basically have the map on my phone at all times.
Oh, you can look at it.
Because you need to know these things.
Yeah, any kind of epic traveling saga, you need a map.
Right.
So a book has a map, I generally think, I'm going to like this book.
Right, yeah. If you open that first page and there's a map, because that shows, like the realism of the books. And we talked a little bit... Right, we talked a little bit last episode... and the episode before about how the books dwells so much on like just the difficulty of I can't even think of the word now. It'll come to me. But the just the logic of how to move people and things, the practicality of it all.
So to get from Dragonstone to Dorne, it's a really long trip. And you have to go past you have to go past King's Landing.
Right. Dragonstone is essentially at the mouth of the bay that King's Landing is in. So they were... Go ahead.
Going a long way around to get... I mean, I guess because they wanted to meet up with the Tyrells, but it would have made more sense to just invade and then have the Tyrells invade from the other side, and then you have two armies attacking.
And it almost... Like, they never really made clear... how the Sand Snakes and the Tyrells even got to Dragonstone. So the assumption is that they gave them a ride. So does that mean that they picked them up at the southern tip of Westeros, sailed up to Dragonstone, had a meeting where they discussed how they would then sail back down to Dorne and Highgarden, and then some of them would keep going around to Casterly Rock. I mean, it's ridiculous. It makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, there was a scene, I think, with Varys and the Olenna and...
Yeah, at the very end, and then all of a sudden Varys is on the boat again.
So you really do wonder, like, where are they all...
Right.
Yeah, like, they're not considering time and geography, I think.
Anymore. It's not
convenient.
It's simply plot development.
Yeah, I mean, and I can understand that for the, because they do want to move things along this season. They only have 7 episodes or so.
Right, yeah.
And they're just trying to rush through it. But in other ways, it is a little confusing. Like, well, how did it get there? And now, like, I wasn't sure, like, once they left that meeting and they take the boats, like, where did that next part? I don't know if you want to get to that yet, but, like, I was very confused in that whole scene.
Yeah,
like,
we'll definitely...
where it came from.
Yeah, well, we'll get into the actual battle later, but... Yeah, let's keep going with this point, though. The fact that... Okay, so the episode before this one, I was griping a little bit about the fact that Euron had to sail by Dragonstone to get to King's Landing.
Yes.
Cersei and Jaime had a conversation in King's Landing about the fact that Daenerys is coming to Dragonstone.
Yeah.
So they know somehow that she's coming to Dragonstone, and didn't Cersei also say that, like, she wanted Euron to come? Like, she knew that he was on his way?
She invited him to come.
She invited him to come.
Yeah.
He's going to sail, essentially, the Iron Fleet, which is supposed to be the most badass fleet, directly by Dragonstone. And they never once in their conversation said, hey, you know what would be good? Like, I get it. It was supposed to be a surprise to the audience in the next episode when Euron attacks them.
Yeah.
But to not even bring it up?
Yeah. I guess they don't think that people realize how close these things are. Or,
yeah. Or how far things are in other elements.
Yeah.
And that's to me, like it's taking away what the fun of the series was, that a close reader could put the pieces together, could look at the map, and could figure out what might happen next, or what problems could go on. Mm-hmm. Like in the second book, A Clash of Kings, when, the Battle of the Blackwater is the climax of the book. It's when Stannis attacked, and in the books, it's actually Cersei who did the wildfire. In the show, it was Tyrion. Tyrion had a giant chain running across the mouth of the river that it sails up. And that leads to one of the most epic scenes where all of Stannis' ships get stuck on this chain. And then Tyrion is basically jumping from deck to deck with the Lannister army to fight the Baratheons who are stuck on this chain.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so cool.
Cool.
But the reason I bring that up is because in the front of that book, they had a map of Blackwater Bay.
Yes, that's right.
Remember? Like, Martin wanted you to understand where the ships are. He wanted you to understand where the armies are and how everything is coming together, because it all fits in with actual historical strategies.
Sure.
Which, fun little tidbit, I recently read that during the Revolutionary War, Washington and the Continental Army actually did that.
Oh, yeah?
They actually, somewhere up the Hudson, I think around West Point, there's a section where the river gets really small, and they strung a chain along so that the English ships would get trapped if they tried to go. Like, they didn't actually fall into the trap the way the Baratheons
Yeah.
do.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Isn't
Cool.
that awesome?
Yeah.
And it's like,
really cool.
there's all these cool little
Yeah.
historical realities to the books.
Sure.
So that whole strategy didn't really make sense, but I was just like, all right, we're going with it.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. And do you watch it online or on TV?
It depends. It depends where I am.
Yeah.
When I need to watch it.
Did you catch the after the episode where the show writers talk about it?
Oh no, I haven't really seen those. Yeah.
So I was watching it with Melissa up in Maine. we managed, thanks to Wi-Fi being everywhere now, to actually watch it while we were way off the grid. And at the end of the episode, D&D, Benioff and Weiss were talking about that scene, and I can't remember which one, but one of them was like, what's really cool about this scene is that it's a bunch of female leaders, and if this were a bunch of old men, it would be a boring scene.
Yeah.
And I definitely appreciate that they're doing that, but Melissa made a great point that it's like, they just literally thought that if you swap genders of characters, that is somehow like women's rights. Like what would have made it a better scene is if somehow they're able to outsmart the men by doing this.
In the end, yes.
No,
I was just noticing that on my second watching just now. I was like, wait a minute, there's all ladies in this room.
Yeah,
I did think that was pretty cool. I did appreciate that, and I thought it was cool. And that's one of the cool things about this series is that there are a lot of women in power, and it's not even questions. It's not a big deal. It's just a thing in this world that we have a lot of kick-ass women on this show, and it's just
funny
how it is
for a TV show and a series that is about medieval awfulness. There is a very clear message, especially in the books, of like pro-feminism.
Oh, definitely.
And people say, like, how can you say that? A series that has like constant rape and battle and all this but it's between the lines. Like take a character like Brienne. Brienne is essentially the most honorable knight in all of Westeros.
Exactly. She's so cool. She's one of my favorites.
Right. I love her so much, especially in the book. And it's not simply they took what should be a male character and swapped the gender. It's a much more like she deals with aspects of sexism in the sexist Westeros culture.
Yeah, she definitely does.
There's the whole thing about the reason in the show she's having that conversation with Pod, and she basically says like she loved Renly because he treated her with respect and everything, even though she was a woman. And it's like, yeah, that's awesome. But in the books, it's even more layered because she kind of says like she knew he was gay, but she liked him for the respect he showed. In the books, she actually did love him, and unrequited love, but she truly did love him, and she doesn't know that he was gay, but she's kind of dealing with like the female role in this medieval society with her father who wanted to just marry her off and become, the lady of whatever. But then he realized, like, that's not her, as Arya said, that's not you. And she could never do that. But then, like, there's the whole issue of when she is training, like, she has to be really good in order to compete. And she is. She totally is.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's just, like, something that's lost on a lot of people is this whole, like, aspect of pro-feminism in George Martin's work.
Yeah, no, I think it's there. I mean, I think some of the, I don't know. There's a whole other show right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we'll probably have multiple episodes about the feminist aspects.
I think even if you had all male characters in that room, though, it still would have gone just as badly. And that's what I think. Like, no. I don't think it mattered that they were women or not.
Right.
It was a bad plan.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of what I'm saying. Like they swap the genders, and to them seem to say, like, that's enough. That's what we need to be a pro-feminist TV show. But it's like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
But then continuing with the strategy, the next scene was in the Red Keep, where Cersei's talking to the remaining loyal generals.
Yes, Mr. Tarly there, right?
Exactly. Which
Dan's daddy, who's another.
Yes, and I'm really
lovely
glad.
Father figure.
Oh my God! Yeah. I'm really glad though that they kind of gave you like more of his backstory when Jaime was talking to him afterwards, because that is direct from the books, that he was the greatest general in Westeros.
Yeah. He's
the only one that was supporting the Targaryens and defeated Robert's forces during Robert's rebellion. And it's funny tying it back to Brienne, when Brienne's having in the books her adventure in the Riverlands trying to find Arya and Sansa, who she never finds, she comes across Randall Tarly, and he's essentially, dispensing the Iron Throne's justice, because he's very similar to Tywin, he's no nonsense, he's tough on everyone.
He even looks like him,
yeah, he does. The bald head.
Yeah, they're at first when I was looking at him, I'm like, wait a minute, and then I remember who he was. So I was like, okay, but there's similar features: the baldness, the terrible father.
Yep, terrible father.
That's another episode for you. Who is the worst dad?
Yeah, who's the worst dad in all of Westeros? I mean, clearly Ned Stark is the best, but all the other ones are pretty awful.
Pretty awful.
It's so bad.
That was an interesting scene. It was interesting to hear Cersei telling I'm looking at Cersei's speech, and I'm like, she's not wrong. But she's telling them about how terrible Dany is and all these horrible things she's done. I'm like, she's not wrong either.
No.
Because Dany has done all these terrible things along the way.
Exactly. And that was kind of cool. Yeah.
The first time I watched it, I was like, oh, man, Cersei, you're full of it. But then the second time, I was like, no, wait a minute. She's absolutely right. She has done terrible, terrible things.
Exactly. And
on her way to Westeros.
I'm so
and terrible
glad.
things have happened to her, too.
You're right.
I'm not saying that the terrible things weren't justified.
Right.
She, the slavers were horrible people.
Right.
The Dothraki even treated her terribly. She's been through a lot of shit on her way.
Absolutely, yeah. And I felt like that was one of the times where they really brought in the complexities of the book.
Yeah.
Because the show has definitely shorthanded it to Dany is your good guy. Dany is your hero. She could do no wrong. You should love her. In the books, though, there's real complexity to her, and you kind of wonder, is she doing the right thing? She does some really awful things to people.
And that's what's so interesting what Tyrion said, do you want to be the Queen of Ashes?
Right.
Because now I think she's seeing, okay, we can't do what we did.
Yeah.
we created enough havoc.
Exactly,
we gotta do things differently here. But
and
it was a very interesting turn on her, though, because you're right. Cersei's the villain, Dany's the hero, always.
Right.
And not that I like Cersei either, but
no, but you can see glimpses.
Very interesting. She's such a great actress, Lena.
Oh yeah, she's Lena Headey. She's fantastic.
She's so good that just everything that comes out of her mouth, you're just like, oh my god.
and so perfect as Cersei. She really nails the character, and but that's kind of one of the other interesting things is how. She's saying all these things, and they are true, but it's also very reminiscent of how you can twist the truth to paint someone in a horrible light. Like, that's the whole issue when Tyrion's having his trial way back in season 4, is that the things that they're saying are all true. And in the book, it goes even further, where, like, Cersei has, like, the Kingsguard to speak against him, so that every time he was pissed off at Joffrey ends up working against him. Every time he threatens someone ends up working against him. And it's one of those really cool elements where, and it's really frightening in how real it is, that someone could take, even if you are a fantastic person, someone could cherry pick elements of your life and paint you in a horrible light.
Yep.
Yeah, so I really like that part. It's funny when I have these conversations with people who are much more casual, and I tell them straight out, like, I like the boring parts. I like the talking. Because I thought that scene was great when they were just discussing and going through that. But let's talk briefly about the next scene, which was down in the dragon pit.
That was cool.
That was cool.
Seen that before?
We have seen it once in the show.
That's what I thought.
In the books, there's a second scene where it's actually Tyrion takes Shay down there to have sex with her at one point. But, and it's one of those, like, one of the things I love about the books, like, when me and Melissa first borrowed the copies of them, we borrowed them from Ross, Melissa's brother, and...
It's all his fault.
Yeah. And,
he got me into it too. So.
Oh, did he? He had, we'll definitely have Ross on at one point, because Ross is a huge fantasy reader. And I'm thinking we'll have him on once the show is done, because he's one of the very few people who read the books and has not watched the show.
Yes, that's right.
But I bring it up because he had the old covers before the show came out.
Oh, yes, I have those too.
Oh, you do? Oh,
yeah,
I want to get copies of those, because I love the mid-90s fantasy art that was on the covers, that completely out of the realm of what the show did. It paints a whole different picture of everything. And that's one of the scenes when Tyrion brings Shay down there, and he describes how, like, the torchlight is causing the dragon skull's shadows to, like, dance in the light. It's so cool. But anyways, the other time, the time we've seen it in book and show, is when Arya was down there in season 1.
Yes.
Remember?
Right.
And she overhears the Varys and Illyrio conversation.
Okay.
Which shows just how far ahead thinking George Martin was, where if you read real closely, having now read through the 5th book, you can understand that they're actually talking about Aegon and not Daenerys, and bringing him to Westeros. And in the show, you know, they did it, but they haven't even really brought it up again, and the show has just really abandoned all those little hints at what's to come. And that's what I find so frustrating about it, is that, like, the book is this ever-expanding puzzle and riddle that you can work out, whereas the show is just kind of what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
But anyways, back to the scene.
Yeah.
So they're down in the dragon pit.
Yes, the dragon pit. I love that.
And Qyburn is like, you know, we're working on something. And he unveils a giant crossbow.
Yeah, that was pretty
a scorpion.
It was huge.
It was huge. And that's actually something direct from the books.
Yeah.
When the Targaryens invaded Westeros, you know, they were able to invade 6 of the 7 kingdoms, but they weren't able to take over Dorne. Because Dorne is all desert, it's all spread out, and every time they tried to bring their dragons or an army, they'd find all the people were gone.
Yeah.
And the Dornish are just like, we're going to keep doing this.
Sure.
You cannot, and that's why their words, unbowed, unbent, unbroken, because it took over 100 years for them to actually become part of the kingdom.
Yes, that's
and it
right.
ended up ultimately being through marriage rather than through war. But one of the things, and I can't remember if it was one of Aegon's sister's dragons or if it was another dragon later in the story, but the Dornish are the first to kill one by using one of those giant, what are called scorpions, the giant crossbow, through the eye of the dragon.
Okay.
And that's actually how they bring them down. A funny aspect, though, is like he fired it directly at the skull, but it's kind of like the skull is not the problem. It's the scales.
Yeah.
It's those impenetrable dragon scales.
And it was also very close range, and the skull wasn't moving or breathing fire.
Right. Yeah.
So,
how do you aim this moving across the sky, possibly a mile up in the air?
You know, they don't have that missing plate like Smog.
Right. Exactly. We don't have the black arrow from Bree.
My first thought too is when they showed that scene, they let unleash the arrow. I just was like, don't you touch those dragons. Like, I was just like, no. Don't go there. Like, I was like, you're not messing with the dragon.
Yeah, don't.
I was like, I got really defensive. I was like, and Cersei's got like that evil, like, the Grinch grin.
Oh, it totally
just, like,
was. Someone should make an edit of the Grinch
like,
song
totally,
to Cersei.
Like her face, she just totally like lit up when that happened. I was like, no. But then, when they thought about it, I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You're right there. I could hit a dragon. It was right there, and it's not moving.
Right.
And,
Yeah. And like you say, super close range.
Yeah.
The other thing is,
so I mean, had a chance.
It was to make a point, and so it's totally cool. But they just like shot an arrow through the most important dragon in the history of Westeros. Like that's essentially going to a museum and taking a hammer to Lucy's bones.
Well, or it was like Napoleon shooting the Sphinx, right?
Right, yeah, great example.
Yeah.
Like this is a pretty important historical thing, but you know they were making a point. They were being badasses. Yeah, they don't care.
But, like you said, another strategy thing. You know, like you said, not moving, close range. Sure, you can hit the dragons all you want.
But I'm sure that they are going to end up taking one down.
Yeah. I don't like of all the characters. I don't want to see die. It's the dragon.
Right. Yeah. It's the old so don't kill the dog.
It's like exactly. It goes back to that when they killed the wolf. You know, like that is just so heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's one of the saddest things is killing the dog.
Yeah. So funny.
Yeah. So
that's what I thought with the animals.
Cruelty to animals and TV show. A lot of people I know like they can watch awful things happen to people on film, but if something happens to an animal, it's just like turn it off.
Don't do it.
I'm done.
Don't hurt the dragon. I really hope one of those dragons beats Cersei. That would be great revenge right there.
Oh my god, yeah, just bites her.
That would be amazing. Or at least, what's his name? I can't even think of his name.
Qyburn?
Yes, Qyburn.
The Maester?
That would be great. Gobble him up.
Yeah, which, man, Qyburn's another one of those characters who's just so much better in the books.
Yeah.
Where it's pretty clear he's kind of using Cersei in the books.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like but in the show, he's just Cersei's man.
Yeah, well, he's speaking of Lord of the Rings, he's totally just like, what's his name? Wormtongue,
Wormtongue. Not Wormtail.
Wormtail's hard part. But he's Wormtongue, you know?
Right.
He's that character.
He's
trying to control things, and he's, you know.
The most accurately named character in all of fantasy, Grima Wormtongue.
That is totally like his great grandson.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, though, in the books, much like how we were saying, like, I love Varys because you don't know what he's up to. I love Qyburn because you don't know what he's up to.
He's another one, yeah.
And that's actually another one of the theories that might be a little too thought out to the point where it's like, I don't think enough people would pick it up. And that, to me, is evidence that it might not be true. But I really love the concept. Have you heard about the Dornish master plan?
No. Here you go, this one.
Okay, so this is a big one. So I'll just try and, sum it up quickly. But going back to my favorite Game of Thrones theorist, Preston Jacobs, his biggest series, like he does, 7 and 8 part theory videos that are super deep and delve as far as possible as you can into the books. But his biggest theory is the Dornish master plan. This idea that the Martells, as we understand them in the books, Doran is actually up to way, way more. That goes back way, way further. And it makes a lot of sense because, why, remember, another thing that's only in the books and not in the show, and a reason the Sand Snakes are really weak in the show, is that they cut out Doran's daughter, Arianne Martell, who's, trying to do this whole scheme to put Marcella on the throne. And then you get to the end of the book, the 4th book, and Doran's like, you're kind of screwing up my plans, daughter, so I'm going to lock you in this tower so that you don't keep screwing up my plans. But then the plan he tells her isn't that great of a plan. The plan he tells her is, I sent your older brother across the sea with this marriage, or even your younger brother. Yeah. I sent your younger brother across the sea to go marry Daenerys, and we're going to bring these dragons back, and that's how we're going to kill the Lannisters. But it's that's a terrible plan, because why would you think that Daenerys, just because there's a document signed before she was born saying that you're supposed to be married, and it wasn't even for them, it was supposed to be that Viserys was going to marry Arianne. This whole long, complex thing. So the Dornish master plan is the idea that the Martells have actually been pulling much bigger strings throughout the story. One of the big ones being that the brave companions, the ones that cut Jaime's hand off, were actually employed by the Martells. And that's why they cut off Jaime's hand, so that they would weaken the Lannisters, and they really want to, shame Tywin before they kill Tywin. And that's why, Oberyn was so adamant about the Mountain confessing that Tywin gave the order for the rape and murder of Elia Martell. And if you remember in the books, Qyburn was originally with the Brave Companions. So then the Dornish master plan goes even deeper in that that's why Qyburn sent the head of the Mountain to the Martells, but then we find out, the Mountain is still very much alive, thanks to Qyburn. So that then Cersei will be exposed as a liar, and, her power will be taken from her. It is very long and very complex, but another one of the theories that I hope is true, but I'm worried because it's between the lines, to figure that one out.
That's how this whole thing works, though, is that all the theories could be true, because it's just so epic and vast that...
It is.
And they just can't possibly cover everything in the books or movie, or show.
Right.
So,
and they definitely can't in the show.
Yeah, so it totally could be valid in there. So, I believe it. Sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, sure. So we'll see.
There's a lot of things going on.
If the next 2 books ever come out, we'll see.
Yes, I know, if they ever do.
Right. But going back to the show, the episode, so the next scene was Jon getting the message from Tyrion.
Okay, yeah.
You know, and so, like, now Jon's gonna go, and he's gonna finally meet Daenerys, something every fan is pissing themselves over. Which,
yes.
I don't really, like, read the BuzzFeed articles or the stuff that people are posting on Facebook or anything.
Or people, like, shipping them or something? Or
Well, you know how BuzzFeed articles are. It's like,
yeah,
we're losing our shit over...
Oh, yeah. You know, I don't read those either.
Exactly. But
yeah.
Apparently everyone thinks next episode, Jon and Daenerys are going to finally meet.
Yeah, well, I think so. I think it's going to happen really soon.
I think it's going to happen, but...
There's a lot of momentum.
If they do properly follow, you know...
Yeah.
First few seasons of Game of Thrones, I think something should prevent them from meeting for at least a few episodes.
Yeah.
Like, because that's always a thing. Something you expect to happen and you want to see happen doesn't happen.
Huh.
You know, it's kind of like once the Starks get split up in the first season, you're just wanting them to all get back together.
Yeah,
and it takes like 5 or 6 seasons, you know. The only ones that have come back together are Sansa and Jon.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm kind of hoping that they do that and they introduce some sort of difficulty and then, you know, maybe give us the big cliffhanger at the end of the last, the 7th episode this season where they do finally meet.
Yeah, I think it seemed like they were arriving, though, in those end of scene, you know, the coming next week scenes. It looks like they were arriving, but...
Oh, did it? I actually don't remember the preview. Did they show them?
Yeah, it looks like, I think it was Davos and Jon, and it looks like they were landing someplace or arriving someplace. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they were arriving at Dragon's, you know, like they could have... And if they do, I think it will be the very end of the episode. Like, I think they will leave that as the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
It's so anticipated that like, I just think that they're speeding the action up, so I think it might happen, but I think it might be the very end of the episode. Like, it won't. It's kind of like at the end of the episode, the first episode was when we finally saw Dany.
Right.
You know, like,
shall we begin?
You're like, yeah, like, it was the very last thing.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't know. I think it could happen sooner than the end of the season, though, because I think they're just everything I've read and heard is that they're really pushing the action to happen this season.
For sure, yeah, because the average fan really just wants to see the action.
Yeah,
they want the plot to move along.
And it was interesting that Sansa, you know, is really taking like she was like, no way, you can't do this.
Yeah, this is dumb. Yeah, everyone tells Jon this is a bad plan. But
I actually think it's one of the only good plans.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're getting a little bit, but the one good thing, I think, the good strategy was leaving Sansa behind in charge. Like, that was
absolutely.
one thing that made sense to me.
Well, and tying back to missing aspects, like the fact that Jon was picked over Sansa to be the king in the north, like, she's the heir to Winterfell. She should have that. And so, like, cool, they're kind of righting that wrong.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think, I was listening to another podcast, and they talked about Jon being a good, like, general and all that, and he would be good during the battle, but then to actually rule, you want somebody like Sansa.
Absolutely, yeah. No, Jon is just not a good practical leader.
Yeah, I mean, he caused such a mess up the wall.
I mean, enough of a mess that he got killed over it. And
died.
That's, exactly. Like, that's in both book and show. Like, he is a good military leader, but he just doesn't understand. Right, he's too good of a person to be a political leader. One of the few good people on the show. And I did like that they called that out. Like, the fact that much like how their father, Ned, died because he was too good of a person to be caught up in the politics of King's Landing.
Yes.
And John, same thing.
He is Ned's son.
Yeah.
He might not be Ned's son, but he is Ned's son.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
totally.
Holy crap, how disappointing was that scene with Littlefinger and John in the catacombs?
Oh, that was weird. Littlefinger's scenes are always weird and awkward.
Yeah, I feel like they they don't know what to do with him anymore.
Yeah, they just need to bring him up to say something creepy and weird. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You know, like, I really love your sister. That is creepy, dude.
Yeah,
You're an
and
old
it's
man.
so...
Don't look at my sister.
It's so, like, antithetical to Littlefinger in the books. Like, you can totally see the clear line where they ran out of Littlefinger's story. Because, like, to catch up non-book readers, in the books, Littlefinger and Sansa are still at the Vale. And it still hasn't been revealed that she's Sansa and not his fake daughter, Elaine.
Yes,
so
right.
They're continuing this whole plot line of trying to essentially take over the Vale from the lords who want it after Lysa dies.
Yeah.
Which is like in the books or in the show where Littlefinger kills her by throwing her out the moon door, all that stuff. And it's such a complex plot involving the different Vale lords and where their allegiances lie. Mm-hmm. And Littlefinger marrying Sansa off, but having to keep up the idea that she's his daughter, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But he's such a schemer, whereas in the show, was easily the worst change from book to show of him marrying her to Ramsay.
Yes.
For no good reason.
That was terrible.
For absolutely no good reason.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. It was actually, it really disturbed me, that whole...
Yeah, it is the most mind-boggling decision because it doesn't make him seem like a schemer. It makes him seem like an idiot.
Yeah,
and it makes
you
him...
say you love her, and how could you do that to her?
And to
disgusting.
Just assume... And, like, they even had a point where, like, he's talking to Ramsay, and he's like, I admit, I don't know you that well. How do you not know Ramsay Bolton that well?
Uh-huh.
You're Peter Baelish. You're Littlefinger. You've been pulling strings since day one. You know everyone in every house.
Yes.
You know every reputation. You manipulate everyone and every reputation. And you don't know Ramsay Bolton's reputation?
Oh,
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was just so... And ever since then, they've kind of, like, done this weird thing where he's creepily staring at Sansa off in the corner.
So creepy. He's such a creep.
And it was so dumb, like, the scene between him and Jon this episode, when they're down in the crypts, and they don't have any conversation about Lyanna, which is what I thought they were going to talk about.
Yeah, well, that's it. I thought he was setting it up to tell him who he really is.
Right,
or something,
and that's what
which would make so much sense leading up to his meeting Dany.
Right. If it was, like, the fact that Littlefinger somehow was able to figure it out, like, that would have been cool.
Didn't he say something like, you don't belong here, or something like that?
And holy shit, was I like, oh my god, they're actually going to delve into this.
Yeah.
And then they didn't at all.
Like, that they were... Because Littlefinger has to know about that.
You would think. Well, I mean, if it was the books, he definitely wouldn't, because it's such a well-kept secret.
Yeah.
But in the show, they could easily just say, like, you know, he's Littlefinger. He figured it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, then instead of talking about that, he was saying, you don't belong here because you're not a Stark.
Yeah.
It's like, come
And that's really
on.
what I thought. Like, they were going to lead up to, like, you don't belong here because you're not really a Stark and you should go meet your auntie.
Right.
Because that's the whole theory. Which I think is, I mean, yeah, like, I thought that would have developed, and they kind of just like backpedaled and didn't. It was kind of useless. Like you said, just something to show Littlefinger.
Yeah. And that whole scene was just a big missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Real quick though, to digress for a minute, just by saying you don't belong here, that in my mind kind of triggered a little Game of Thrones fun little tidbit.
Yeah.
That we'll also do an entire episode once the show is off. One of the cool things, like the Crypts of Winterfell, is a big issue. It's a big part of the books. Like the fact that Robert and Ned, in the first episode, and it's early in the first book that they go down there and they have that conversation. Mm-hmm. And then that's where Bran and Rickon are hiding out when Theon takes over Winterfell. And then later, when Theon is Reek and he's back at Winterfell, he goes down to the crypts with Lady Dustin. And Lady Dustin is one of the northern ladies, of House Dustin. And she and Theon have one of the most interesting conversations where she kind of reveals that she was in love with Ned's older brother, Brandon. And she felt completely slighted by the Starks that she didn't get to marry Brandon. And she essentially explains and confirms what a lot of people thought was a theory, that the Ned's father, Rickard Stark, and Catelyn's father, Tully, and the Jon Arryn of the Vale, and all of these people were scheming to combine their houses against the Targaryens before Robert's Rebellion even began. What they call the Southron Ambitions. And so it's like this whole interesting thing. Another thing is the fact that what's missing from the crypts are the swords that Bran and Rickon and Osha and Hodor and Mira and Jojen all took from the crypts. So a lot of people think like maybe she went down with Reek so that she could confirm what the Northern Lords had suspected, that Bran and Rickon are still alive. Yeah. Then there's also the other aspect of it, is the fact that Ned put his brother, Brandon, and his sister, Lyanna, in the crypts when the only people who are supposed to be in the crypts are the Lords of Winterfell. It's this long, unbroken chain of Starks that have statues and swords down in the crypts. And for some reason, Ned put his brother and sister down there. So, do what you will with that information. But it's led to a lot of fans coming up with, like, different theories on the whole thing. Yeah. And then also, which they kind of reference, because they were at Ned's statue there, which is where his bones were. And they even mentioned, didn't they? Didn't maybe Littlefinger say something along the lines of, like, I delivered your bones to Catelyn? Oh, okay. Yeah, and Ned's bones are actually a big issue in the books because they actually disappear at one point. Okay. Because there's this whole thing with Catelyn getting the bones.
That's right, because she was going to go get them herself.
And then sending them up back to Winterfell, but the people she sends them with, one is Mage Mormont, and the other one is, I think, Hal Mullen. So many names in the story. Yeah. But it brings up the whole issue of, like, where are Ned's bones now? And if there is some sort of magic in a person's bones, like, are they being used? Huh. So, little aside that I wanted to mention. Up next, we have, back in the Riverlands, Arya with the adorable hot pie.
Oh, that was great. It was, I've always hoped that Hot Pie was just hanging out there in his little B&B.
Yep, everyone loves Hot Pie.
Making pie.
Yep, and sure enough, he is.
That's what he's doing, and I was so happy to see him there. Same as always, happy guy.
I know, I loved it.
Great cook. It was such a great scene.
Yeah.
Somebody who knew Arya before, like he even called her Harry, right? Like
Ari, yeah.
Ari, yeah.
Arry. Mm-hmm.
From her old, when she was
right, which was her fake name when she was a boy. Yeah, that was so cool.
It was just it was a nice moment, and I really enjoyed seeing him. And Arya coming back and finding out,
Arya
by the way, your brother's
making
king,
the decision.
there.
Her saying, all right, you know what? Maybe I'm not going to go kill Cersei. Maybe I'm going to go seek out Jon and Sansa.
Yeah, which would be nice. But of course, now Jon's not going to be there.
Right, now Jon's not going to be there. They can never meet back up.
Yeah, and it would be very interesting because, Sansa and Arya are such different people from when they split up all those years ago.
Yeah.
They're so different now that, any reunion between it's just going to be so interesting.
Right,
just like
absolutely.
when Jon and Sansa got back together, like, it's just going to be really fascinating to see them back. And I think it's going to happen soon, too.
Well, and it's kind of sad that she's not going to run into Jon because Jon and Arya had such a connection.
Yeah.
He gave her needle.
Yes.
One of my favorite passages in the entire series is when Arya is at the House of Black and White and she has to give up needle, which, did happen in the show. It was really, I'm glad that they added that in, but it's one of the most beautiful passages where she essentially can't give up needle, which to me is like the message that she will never be no one. Because she essentially says she couldn't give up Needle because Needle was her. Needle was her history, and Needle was Jon. Needle was the way Jon used to tussle her hair, and the way they had such a connection. But another fun little outside of the book's fact. Did you know that the actor who plays Hot Pie actually has a bakery?
Really? Oh, that's so funny.
And he makes little direwolf breads.
That's awesome. That is so cute.
Yeah, one of those cool little things.
Way to capitalize off your career.
Seriously, yeah. Well, like the guy who plays Hodor is a DJ, DJ Hodor.
Yeah. No, that's great.
I love those little side things.
That's a great little reunion, and it was one of my favorite things of the show, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Being Hot Pie.
Mm-hmm. And then, after that, she meets up with Nymeria, speaking of...
yes, just another person.
Coming back together.
Another animal. I've always imagined that Nymeria has been running around.
Right. Well, and remember, in the books, we do find out that Nymeria has not just been running around, but she's leading
pack, right?
a gigantic pack.
Yes.
Like a pack of thousands of smaller wolves that are essentially killing Freys, essentially getting revenge for the Red Wedding.
Yeah.
And, since in the books Arya is a warg, she's occasionally going into Nymeria. And she actually, when she's warged in Nymeria, is the one that finds Catelyn's body in the river and pulls it out.
Yeah.
One of those awesome aspects of the books that's not in the show at all.
Yes, that's right. It's been so long since I read the books.
I know. There's so many cool little things.
So many things,
But they're so long. Like, it's like 8 months to read the whole series.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm figuring once the show is done, I can refocus on the books, and they'll be like, wait, this wasn't in the show.
Yeah, exactly. Or, wait, he foreshadowed this 5 books ahead of time? Holy crap.
Yeah. But, like I said, I have an affection for the animal, so it's nice to see her, even though she is, a total wild creature now.
Wild child, yeah.
It was, the two of them coming together, and she's like...
Yeah, which was
cool. Very cool.
But, again, I wish there was a little bit more depth, which, they haven't even explained Nymeria's name.
Uh-huh.
Right? like, I feel like they maybe referenced it in the first episode where she gave her the name.
When they all named their wolf.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite aspects of Arya. Why Arya was one of my favorite characters in the beginning, because to digress again, like people always accuse me of just hating the show and loving only the books, but I do think the show did some things better than the books. And the biggest one being in season 2 when Arya and Tywin, are together and she's his cupbearer. I loved all the tension of, is he going to find out? Yep. I loved their relationship, that kind of like Grandpa Tywin aspect.
That was great stuff.
Mm-hmm. And like one of the conversations they have is about the Aegon and his sisters. Mm-hmm. And, Arya knows her history. That's an important aspect of Arya's life, is that she is an intelligent girl. Like, she read her history, and she has favorite women from the past. And the reason she named her wolf Nymeria is because Nymeria was the queen of the Rhoynar. And the Rhoynar, you know how when they're giving, like, the full title of the King of Westeros, and they also do it for Daenerys, it's like Kings of the Andals and the First Men and the Rhoynar. Well, the Rhoynar were the third group of people to land in Westeros. And they're essentially the ancestors of the Dornish. Which is part of why the Dornish are so different from the rest of Westeros. Because they are of a very different line, It's kind of, it's on par with, like, French in New Orleans.
Sure.
Where it's like the rest of the country is mostly English. And then the French are in New Orleans because they had Louisiana. So what Nymeria did was because I think it was the Targaryens were like enslaving so many people in Essos, and the Rhoynar, the Rhoyne was the huge river that goes through Essos. Very clearly taken from the Rhine or the Rhone in real Europe. And so she took all her people and she said, we're all on boats, so we're just going to take our boats and we're going to sail until we're away from these Targaryens, and we're going to set up shop somewhere else. And so then when they found Westeros, she burned the entire fleet so that they wouldn't leave. So that she was like, here's where we are, we're in Westeros. And she married the Prince of Dorne, who was the Martells. So that's why the Dornish and the Martells are connected to the Rhoynar. And, she was the queen. The Rhoynar were a very feminist culture, unlike the rest of Westeros and Essos. And, tying back into the subtle feminism aspects. And that's why the Dornish do have laws that are much more progressive than the rest of Westeros. Because, and that's also, I can't remember if they're the sun or they're the spear, but how their sigil is the sun with a spear going through it? It's either the Martells were the spear and the Rhoynar were the sun, but for whatever reason, like it was the coming together of these great houses. Yeah, so just a little aside about Nymeria, but in the show instead we got a cute little connection, and then they walked away.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping hopefully through the magical geography of the TV show, she'll be there next week.
Right,
or
right.
This week, she'll be there too.
and what worries me though is that it's gonna be like some big moment where Arya, you think she's gonna die, and then Nymeria rushes in and saves her. Because that's something the show has been doing that the books would never do. Where at the last minute, you get saved.
I don't know, though. I think, it would be something really big for Arya to get that close.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, we'll see. But moving on to the next scene, Next was in Old Town.
Oh, yes.
Where Sam...
Now...
Yeah,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sam and Jorah. This, to me, was like one of the biggest, like, jump the shark scenes in all of Lord of the Rings. Like, confusing. In Game of Thrones. Because, oh, yeah, let's just chip off this grayscale.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's ever done that before.
Thank you.
Ever?
Thank
no one
you.
has ever thought of doing this before?
Sam has
Sam
some
is the
sort
only one.
of ancient wisdom that he found. That's illegal, apparently. He has some sort of ancient way, and what it is we're going to cut it off and put lotion on it.
And then he found it in all the vast
oh my
files
God,
and
yeah.
archives. He conveniently found the cure for grayscale,
right.
which is just cutting it off.
Which is cut it off, yeah.
And put some lotion on it.
It made
me
so angry.
It really was just. I mean, I thought the scene was cool, like poor Jorah, like in agony. But
well, that's another thing, though, that in the books, the character who gets grayscale is not Jorah, but is John Connington, who is...
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, who is the guy who's been leading the young Aegon. I'm so glad we brought that up earlier in the episode.
That's right. Now, is he the one that Tyrion
is with? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay.
And at first that they're lying to Tyrion, they don't tell him who he really is.
They're all on their way to Daenerys.
Right. He's going by the name Old Griff and Young Griff because
right.
John Connington's sigil is a griffin.
Yeah.
And John Connington was also secretly in love with Rhaegar. He was Rhaegar's best friend.
Okay.
And, like, there's all of that going into it. And he gets the grayscale when Tyrion and the rest of them are in the Sorrows.
Yes, when they're on their way through.
Right, exactly.
And Tyrion is worried about it. Yes, that's right.
But one of the things that they mention that's because he goes pretty deep on, like, grayscale and the realities of it.
Yes.
And it's kind of like leprosy, you know, where it's like everyone is afraid of it and all of that. But one of the important aspects is that when you get grayscale, you go numb.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, Jorah is in extreme pain as they cut it off. Just because, you know, we can't have someone... You know, we got to show pain in this episode. Yeah. We got to make it a difficult to watch thing.
Interesting. If it was numb, it would be really boring. It would be like someone at the dentist getting a root canal, you know.
Yeah.
Not interesting. But just to me, though, the whole idea was just kind of stupid.
It really was. And another thing that they address in the books is that the cure for grayscale is to cut off the limb that's affected with grayscale.
Which is
but
what
even
they
then,
in the first place.
Right, exactly. Like when it was just his arm. But even then, it still might come back. Like that's one of the aspects of it is do you just cut it off? You know? And another aspect is the way you check if you're worried you might have grayscale is that you prick every finger and every toe. So Tyrion does this after he's in the Sorrows, and he can feel them all. So he knows that he doesn't have grayscale.
Yeah, because, I mean, you're pretty much like turning into a rock.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's why they call them the Stone Men. Yeah. Because, you become a rock, and then I did like that they addressed that it'll affect your brain a lot sooner than you'll die from it.
Yes.
But,
it's all those crazy zombie-like people.
Nobody thought to cut it off.
Nobody thought to cut it off.
And put the ointment.
And I have a little aside here. I mentioned earlier, I collected Funko Pops from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Jorah Mormont is one of my favorite pops from Game of Thrones.
Really?
Why? Because there is an awesome, tiny little detail on his arm. It's like, I'll have to bring it over or something to show you sometime.
Yeah.
It's like this tiny little fleck of grayscale.
Really?
And it's like behind his arm. Like it's not something you would even notice in the box. It's like a hidden little... It's like just the coolest little detail.
Did they release it before that episode? Because that would be really cool if they knew ahead of time.
I don't know. It's
probably not.
It's one of the more recent waves. It was like they're up to like wave 10 or something. In Game of Thrones. They have so many. It's one of the more recent ones that came out.
Yeah.
But when I saw that, I was just like, this is cool. Like, it was really cool. I don't know. It's just one of those that's one of the things I like about Funko so much is that they've gotten so detailed
Yeah.
over the years, and they include really cool things like that.
Right.
That to me, that was just one of my favorite things about
That
Joe. And that
is
was when he
cool.
only had a little tiny bit of it on his arm. And now
That's
he's
so
like,
funny.
now he looks like, he reminded me of what's her name from. What's her name? I can't think of it. The Mystique.
Oh yeah.
Like all the scales.
Yeah.
It reminded
It's
me
just
of Mystique.
covering
It was
him.
so gross and just blue and scaly and
Yeah.
But like why not take a warm bubble bath and now you're great scales? Like that would have just been the even more dumber thing.
Seriously, it was ridiculous.
I admire Sam for trying.
Yep.
I do love Sam,
and we'll see what comes of it. If it turns out that cutting it off and putting ointment on will cure it.
Have better things to do, Sam. Like, aren't you supposed to be training so you can help John?
Yeah.
Like,
well, and real quick though, one of the things that it wasn't in the show, so I understand why they didn't mention it, but is kind of crazy about the two characters being together in the books. Remember, Sam is with Lord Commander Mormont when he dies, in Craster's Keep. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the more interesting character chapters because Sam actually, blacks out during it. And
that's right.
when he comes to, Mormont's head is in his lap, and the last request he makes is tell Jorah, my son, to join the Watch. It's almost like a non sequitur, because it's like, why does Lord Commander Mormont think that Sam is going to go find his son Jorah in Essos, who's been exiled, and tell him to join the Watch? Like, it doesn't really make much sense. Yeah, but it would have been kind of cool if that had happened in the show, and that he had been able to tell him that.
Yeah. Well, it seems like he might have been going off to join the Watch, like when he left Dany in the first place or something, but no.
Yeah, but in the books, Jorah's the one with Tyrion.
Yeah.
Still, they haven't gotten back to Daenerys.
No.
They're actually outside the city walls when Drogon takes her.
Magical journey.
Right.
Tyrion got there so fast.
Seriously. It took no time.
No time at all. He didn't have to be in in a midget show.
Right, yeah. Right. Which is what I love about the book.
Gosh,
a lot of people a lot of people dislike, the fourth and fifth book because they feel like not a lot happens. Yeah. I love it because especially with Tyrion, you get a ton of Tyrion chapters where not much happens. It's just Tyrion on boats over and over again, and in a carriage, and making his way slowly.
Having crazy adventures.
Yeah, but I love it. You get so much character development and so much information.
Yeah. And I'm all for Tyrion, so I definitely like the Tyrion stuff.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so now we are finally to the final scene. You want to try?
Yeah.
We've actually just had our special guest show up. Come say
right.
hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Melissa is here, my wife.
Hi, Robin.
And my cousin.
Yep, Robin's cousin.
She was my cousin first.
Yeah. It's a family affair.
Long before.
Yes.
So you're just in time for us to talk about the final scene.
Oh boy.
The big Greyjoy battle.
Oh man.
So, man, where to begin? Let me start off by saying this. I, as I said before and have said on previous podcasts, love the Greyjoys for their aesthetic only.
It's funny.
And I was so happy to finally see a huge sea battle in which Euron just flags ablazing, jumps onto the ship, axes going, and they're fighting.
Yeah.
Having said that, once again, the strategies made no sense whatsoever.
Well, to me, we were talking before about the geography. I was like, where was this happening? Did they just get on the boat and they're like, oh, we're outside now, there's another ship? Because
Yeah, none of it makes any sense whatsoever
Was nobody
anymore.
watching?
Geography.
The travel
like-
times, nothing.
No,
It makes-
yeah, we were just talking
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, like,
So the Iron Fleet, that Euron rebuilt within a month or whatever. This giant Iron Fleet. Nobody was keeping watch out.
nobody noticed the big black sail.
Yeah, like I know it was at night and all,
Yeah.
but
maybe not.
instantly
so cool.
everything is on fire.
Yes.
And
It
like
just happened
instantly,
so fast.
yeah, they were there. And then it also seemed like, because the whole thing was supposed to be that Theon and Yara took all of the original Iron Fleet, all of the best ships. So they've got a giant fleet.
Yeah.
And they took all those ships, so they're supposed to be this massive sailing
Yeah,
force.
I remember we did talk about that because it's like, what did they do? Like rebuilt, like cut down all the trees and rebuilt all of their
Rebuilt this
ships
whole
super
fleet.
fast.
But what I was gonna say is, like, they should have a gigantic fleet who are going up against the new Iron Fleet, and it seemed like all of a sudden they're the only ship left. There was no one else.
Like they all just disappeared.
And real quick,
Wait,
Before-
are we going to talk about the really bad?
I was just
the-
gonna say that before we
show
go
writing.
a little bit further into. So, yeah, let's talk about the worst line in the history of Game of Thrones since the bad pussy line. When Ilaria Sand and Yara are about to hook up, and she says, "Prepare for a foreign invasion."
Ew.
We were both
You know,
just like, oh, are you kidding me?
I didn't even notice that because I was. Oh, that's hilarious.
It was
That's
so
terrible.
bad. We both audibly groaned.
I heard that scene was totally improvised too, so maybe that's why. It was
Oh.
so
and
bad.
I bet they thought it was
Like,
so cool when
The
they did
actress
it.
was improvised, but yeah.
Yeah, they were.
Originally, I was just listening to something like Theon was supposed to be in that scene, but they've already had a similar scene with Theon.
Uh-huh.
Well, he was in the scene.
He was
but
kind
he wasn't
of.
really talking. That's who she was referring to
Yeah.
when she directed the line to Theon because
Okay.
they were like, Theon,
Doesn't
well-
have a dick.
well, they're like, well, what's he gonna do for you? He's gonna be my protector. It was like leading
Yeah.
up for the end,
Right,
scene,
leading up to that.
to the
Mhm.
battle scene
Yeah,
with him.
yeah.
Well, there's about to be a foreign invasion.
Oh my
Oh.
god, it was.
Yeah.
It
Oh, I must have blocked it
was
out.
so.
Yeah.
It was so cringeworthy.
Yeah.
But a couple of things, though, to mention, since this is all about tying it to the books,
Mm-hmm.
that I did, aspects I did like about the scene. Well, we did catch glimpses of Euron's sails in the previous one. Did you notice how his sigil, the Kraken, has that red eye in the center?
Oh, no.
So that's actually a loose reference to in the books because Euron was exiled for banging Victarion's wife. The sigil he takes is different from the Greyjoy sigil. Because another thing is in the books, he has an eye patch, and his nickname is Euron Crow's Eye. So his sigil is actually a giant red eye, much like Mordor, and above it is a crown being held up by a bunch of crows.
Oh, weird.
So that was a neat little reference to the books that they threw into
this.
this.
Closely now.
Mm-hmm. And the other
Cool.
thing, tying back to what happened in the show, did you notice how the trigger that made Theon PTSD and jump was the soldiers were cutting out the tongues of the other soldiers?
Oh, is that what they were doing?
Yeah, they were cutting out their tongues.
Oh.
And that's actually ties into the books because
Yeah.
Euron's crew is all mutes who have willingly cut out their tongues for some
Okay.
reason. Another.
That whole-
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, the whole scene was such a blur blur to me. Like, it just all kind of seemed to happen really fast.
It did.
Yeah.
It was so dark.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm like, why did they film scenes so dark so you can't see anything?
Yeah. That was clearly
you have a big budget. Use some lighting.
I think that.
Getting killed.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. It was the budgeting aspect.
It was like, that was one thing I was looking forward to getting. I didn't get that far in my rewatch, but I need to watch it again.
Yeah, just to see what's going on.
It
well,
was
thankfully they killed off 2 of the 3 sand snakes.
Yes, that I did see. And I actually saw a spoiler on Facebook about that, so it's kind of annoying, but not that annoying, because I was like, well, I don't care about them anyway.
Yeah, that's stupid.
I was annoyed that somebody put a spoiler, but I was like,
yeah.
Maybe get rid of some people at this point, because there's just too many characters.
Mm-hmm. And let's just talk about, like, how ridiculous it is that they took the sand snakes, who, in the books, are awesome because Oberyn has trained them and educated them. They're very smart women who are essentially scheming, even though they dislike Doran because he doesn't seem to be getting revenge for Oberyn's death. They dislike, they want revenge and all, but really only Obara, the oldest one, the one with the spear, only she is like a warrior. But in the show, they were like, all right, they're like the Ninja Turtles. They each have their own weapons. Lady Nim, she wields the whip. Lady Tyene, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
But like in the books, Tyene is like, well, they did kind of make her knowledgeable on poisons, but it's much more tied into Oberyn and him being into poisons.
Yeah.
But then this episode really showcased like, who fights with a whip? How do you take on dudes with axes and shields and swords with a whip? And like, remember there was that stupid sequence last season where they killed Tristane, who is the heir to House Martell, and she's like gonna take him on in close quarters with her whip. Like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna get your whip caught on all the stuff in the room. There's no way this is gonna work. Yeah.
Pretty funny.
It
I
was
wonder why
so stupid.
Yeah, I wasn't too upset about that. I don't even know their names really on the show
because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. To the Dorn stuff, it was always one of my least favorite things.
It really
on the show,
is.
And
yeah, it's sad that they ruined it so bad.
Yeah, because it's one of the cooler aspects of the books.
Yeah.
And it's one of the aspects that very strongly ties into the overarching message of the books of like, seeking violent revenge is stupid because you just get in worse than you started from. And one of the sadder character changes is that Ilaria, the mother, Oberyn's paramour, in the books, she's the one saying, like, she literally says, will getting revenge on the Lannisters bring Oberyn back? No. Why are you going to, waste your time? And, like, in the books, she's not one of the Sand Snake's mothers. She has 4 daughters, but they're all young. They're all, like, younger than preteen. And she is essentially saying, like, nothing you do to seek violent revenge is going to help my 4 daughters. It's only going to hurt them and put their lives in danger. So you should not be going after the Lannisters anymore. It's one of the most telling chapters of the books. And I think it's from Ario Hota, the bodyguard, the big black bodyguard of Doran. I think it's from his perspective as he's watching them all kind of discuss what they're going to do. So that was that. Anything else about the final? Oh, I did like Euron's tentacled knife that he was holding up to Yara, and how it kind of looked like she had a tentacle wrapped around her neck.
Yeah,
that was a cool little visual touch. I give the show credit where credit is due.
Yeah. That whole end scene with the camera
All 3
work
of
just the the no words and the close-ups on the face and the expressions, that I think was really well done.
Right.
And his laugh after
his
the
laugh, his maniacal
off.
laugh.
I do think that was well done. You get a good sense of all of their characters at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And man, like, we've all been rooting for Theon to turn things around, and
oh man, that
he's
scene
just
was one of my favorite things, though.
Oh
when
man,
he just jumped off the boat.
yeah, he's like, I'm out of here.
I laughed so hard, and that was what was just so great. Like, this horrible battle just happened. I'm like, what is going on? And then he kind of was like, yeah, that's what I would do too. Jump
He goes,
off the boat.
peace.
But, like, I feel like that's kind of true to the way that the books are written, that, like,
Yeah,
he isn't fully reformed yet. Like,
He's so messed up.
there's, you know, people have their ups and downs. Like, you really were hoping that he would just turn it around and be the strong, like, dig into whatever strength he had left and, like, could at least even attempt to go forward, but he just didn't have it in him.
right. It was one of the few times where what you hope for doesn't happen, which lately the show has done the opposite.
I mean, I thought maybe he was going to be like, yeah, I'll join up with you, Uncle. Forget my sister.
Oh, that would have been crazy.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting
That was what I
twist.
thought might have happened at
Yeah.
first.
If like, he goes full on Reek and just submits
his
himself.
allegiance has always been questionable. You
Right.
know, like,
Mm-hmm.
but no, he just
He just jumps right over.
That is awesome. I love that. I thought it was just so funny. I just thought it was like so perfectly beyond to
it
jump off.
really
And, like,
was.
I thought it could have gone either way. He could have either betrayed his sister, because that would have been perfectly Theon, like old Theon.
Yeah.
Or, you know, it just it cracked me up.
Yeah, for sure.
And you just see him there in the water, right? Like he was just.
And it's
What a
like, I guess he's gonna swim back to Dragonstone.
Yeah, that's what I was
Maybe.
thinking too. Like, so what
So
happens
is he
now?
dead? Like, yeah,
Oh
that's kind of
man!
weird.
And him and Varys can hang out.
Right, or Gendry. Maybe he'll find Gendry rowing the boat from
Gendry.
season
Where's
3.
Gendry?
Oh yeah.
That's funny.
How funny would that be?
Oh man, that is too funny.
But yeah, I think that about wraps up the episode.
Yeah.
And hopefully later on this week we can get together and talk about the episode that airs tomorrow.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to it.
We are now live on SoundCloud, and I'm going to look into posting this podcast elsewhere. So
Cool.
I want to thank you, Robin, for coming on.
Oh yeah, no, this was fun. I love talking Game of Thrones, and I love talking with
Absolutely.
you guys about it. So
Who
fun.
doesn't? And Melissa, I
Yeah.
want to thank you for joining.
Yep. Glad I got to come in at that tail end of this.
Mm-hmm. And once again, with the worst sign-off in podcast history, from our throne to yours, this is Explain of Thrones.